The 2021 federal election is quickly approaching, and today we have the opportunity to discuss some of the issues affecting the Windy City with the Lethbridge Christian Heritage Party candidate, Geoffrey Capp. Geoffrey, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much.
Now, Geoffrey, the CHP is a smaller, less-known political party. Can you explain really what your party represents?
Well, our three-word sum up is life, family, and freedom. We support protecting human life at all stages, providing compassionate care for the elderly and disabled, and establishing conscience legislation and life-affirming guidelines for healthcare workers and doctors. We promote and defend traditional marriage. A $1,000 per month allowance would assist families in the care of children and elderly in the home. The adoption process should be streamlined and made more affordable. We would establish restitution for victims of property crime with stiffer sentences for violent offenders. We would improve immigration controls to safeguard Canadian values of equality between men and women and our standard of equal justice for all. We would end judicial activism and ideological bullying.
Okay, now, Geoffrey, let's talk about affordable housing for just a moment here. Many young people I've talked to, or even some seniors, they really can't afford to buy a house. It's terrible, or even their rent. What would your party do to make home ownership, or just even the rent, that much more affordable?
I perceive that housing costs are being driven by unfair competition. Housing is a basic need for Canadians, and it is grossly unfair to be outbid by people who are neither hold Canadian citizenship nor are permanent residents. We know prices have become absurd when a rickety garage in Toronto has a six-digit price. We would strengthen the family unit, reduce divorce, and the necessity of one couple maintaining two homes. We would make stay-at-home parenting more affordable.
Now, let's talk about the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of business owners almost lost their livelihoods. Some businesses had to shut down. Many families were severely impacted by the lockdowns. How would your party have handled things maybe a little bit differently with the pandemic?
The response is partly provincial, partly federal, although the federal government has a lot of leadership to give here. Small businesses should never have been forced to close while Walmart, Costco, and other giants stayed open. It makes more sense to distribute customers among small stores, which can better observe what needs to be sanitized than the milling about in a large store. CHP would not support lockdowns should any future ones be planned. The foundation of how government handles the pandemic must be truth, respect for divergent viewpoints, and a willingness to discuss differences and use logic, science, and our base of knowledge. What I have witnessed from the federal Liberal government is arrogance, disrespect for divergent viewpoints, and ad hominem attacks on those asking questions or challenging measures that are applied unfairly or in the absence of sound science. The quarantine hotels, which the government initially denied as a conspiracy theory, were very badly and hypocritically managed.
Now, there have been many cases of churches clashing with various governments over the right to gather for worship during the COVID-19 lockdowns. Geoffrey, concern has been expressed that there's kind of a double standard. You mentioned the big box stores earlier and much tougher restrictions for churches and small business owners. How do you see the issue of religious freedom during the COVID-19 pandemic?
I do see a double standard that big box stores, even ones with restaurants, stayed open, but small businesses were shut down, sometimes in a very brutal and callous manner by police. My understanding is that churches like that of Pastor Coates near Edmonton provided evidence that they are not spreading COVID, but the government claims they will and have not produced evidence. A Feed the Homeless program run by a church in Calgary has been shut down by the city, but the city offers nothing to replace this aid, leaving the homeless even more vulnerable to illness. The church is far more effective than bureaucracy in helping those in need. It is the mission that Christ charged us with.
Now, federal spending during the pandemic has left Canada with a massive national debt. I believe the last take with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation is $1.1 trillion. What kind of monetary policy will your party follow in order to create jobs, boost the economy, without placing that unmanageable financial burden on our future generations?
Well, deficit spending, which adds to the national debt, is like living on the taxes that will be paid by our children and grandchildren. We are stealing from them. A balanced budget is an urgent priority. We can stimulate job creation by emulating the same program that Canada used in the 2 decades after the Second World War. The Bank of Canada issuing interest free loans to governments and crown corporations to repair, replace, and expand our crumbling infrastructure. This program, when it was used, it touched off the longest lasting period of growth and prosperity in our history. It put people to work earning taxable income. They spent it on homes, cars, furniture, travel. It put businesses to work earning income that was spent on paying employees, buying equipment, which stimulated other businesses. We can reflect smarter environmental practices as part of a new program. We must pay off the debt like a mortgage and press forward to the celebration of a national mortgage burning.
Now let's talk a bit about healthcare. Let's circle back to that for just a moment here. How will you work with the province to tackle the doctor shortage, especially here in Lethbridge? It's getting very bad.
Well, our healthcare system is good, but can be improved. More emphasis should be placed on preventive care and alternative medicine. Big pharma must not maintain its monopoly on treatment protocols and access to drugs. New hospitals must incorporate modern design features to limit the spread of infectious disease, including private rooms. We would shorten waiting lists for urgent treatments with credentials from more qualified doctors and defund, that is, stop funding elective procedures that do not promote health.
So, just between you and I right now, how would you actually attract more doctors and nurses, more medical professionals to come to southwestern Alberta? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure if I can address it specifically to a region, but there are doctors who come to Canada and their credentials are often not being accepted. Well, rather than deny them the value of their credentials or to just suddenly approve them, perhaps they should go through a short period of internship where the credentials they have are, yeah, that's very good. You're confirmed to say exactly what you're capable of, and we'll give you your full recognition. So we need to ensure that they're qualified, but then get them on the roll as soon as possible.
Now, the Christian Heritage Party, Geoffrey, is perhaps best known for being the only pro life political party. Now, how would you go about bringing about change in this area when it appears that the majority of Canadians are pro choice?
Well, in fact, the majority of Canadians do, at the very least, believe abortion should not be carried out in the third trimester. A lot of Canadians do not understand just how human we are, even after just a month in the womb. And a lot of Canadians are not aware that it is men who are often pushing women to have abortions so that they can avoid their paternal responsibilities. There are crisis pregnancy support groups ready to help women through this. We need people to understand who is in the womb and connect women with groups ready to help them monetarily, emotionally, and unfortunately, our activist Supreme Court will need a lot of convincing when Canadians are ready to demand support for the unborn. In the meantime, we have open season on babies in the same way as only two countries, communist China and communist North Korea. That's hardly distinguished company for Canada to be in.
So, what are your thoughts then on the Trudeau Liberals funding some of these abortion clinics outside of Canada?
Frankly, they should mind their own business. What other countries do is their own business, and I don't think we'd appreciate it if other countries, let's say, I think the liberals in this country would not appreciate if pro-life countries came in here and started muddling around with our affair. This has to be a decision that we as Canadians make, and it should not have even been given to the court to override and change the law. That's the job of legislators who are elected by us. The judges are not elected. And if they have a concern with the law, I think that they should refer their concerns to elected legislatures and let them wrestle with any changes.
Geoffrey, freedom of speech is a key concern for many parties heading into the September 20th election. Where do you think Canadians are losing the right to speak freely? And do you think we need the government to protect us from hate speech, especially online?
Well, for a man who claims to be tolerant, Justin Trudeau is in fact one of the most intolerant prime ministers we've ever had. He'll take taxes from conservative people, but he certainly won't let conservative groups participate in programs such as Canada Works, only because of a divergence in opinion on life issues. He calls un-Canadian those whose views are different from his. Human rights commissions, which were meant to ensure fairness in essentials such as hiring, housing, have presumed to regulate speech and the operation of facilities that are free enterprise, and have ordered people to stop speaking and publishing their views. We would modify the Canadian Human Rights Act to rein in commissions, to return to their original intended mandates, and to dismiss applications based merely on objectionable views being presented.
Now, education is always a federal election issue, but the CHP has some different concerns on this issue than most other political parties. Can you explain some of your concerns?
Well, it is primarily a provincial jurisdiction, but the federal government does play a role, for example, in financing universities. Universities are being reckless with their costs, counting on raising tuitions to cover their inefficiency and their generosity to tenured staff. CHP would replace block funding and instead issue vouchers to students who could shop around for the institution that best fits their interest and their ability to pay, and giving the voucher to that institution, the representing federal support funds. So the university would basically have to work hard to keep their costs down to get those vouchers and therefore get that federal money. The federal government must protect children from the teaching of harmful ideologies such as gender fluidity, economic socialism, slanted versions of history that, for example, vilify the Allied forces in the Second World War. We consider parents to be first and primary educators of their own children, and the right to guide their children and exclude them from programs that parents consider unhealthy or unwise, and the right to know exactly what is being taught to their children.
Now, let's talk about the environment for just a moment here. Many people here in southern Alberta, including a lot of farmers I've chatted with, are not happy about the carbon tax, drying their grains. A lot of homeowners as well are feeling the pinch from the carbon tax. Is this really the right way to protect the environment, or there may be other options we need to consider?
Well, carbon tax should not be imposed on everyday business and personal necessities, for example, heating your home or business. It should not be imposed on trucks that are delivering product from source to buyer. I mean, that's just pushing up the price, and yet we're going to have to pay the carbon levy because there's no way we're going to stop doing those things. It would make more sense to put the carbon levy on things we don't have to do. We don't have to watch cars race around an auto track. We don't have to use a snowmobile or an ATV to get into the back country and see the same. We could put on hiking boots and walk out there. It's good exercise. So I think we should focus it on discretionary activities and not on the essentials. And we could bring back incandescent light bulbs. They give off carbonless heat. Why the better? Without those incandescent light bulbs, our furnaces have to run longer and warmer to keep our homes warm. And we're going to keep our homes warm because we live in a cold country.
The National Day of Truth and Reconciliation is coming up on September the 30th. Now, reconciliation and racism have been in the spotlight over much of the past year. A lot has been promised, Geoffrey, but observers point out that not much has changed. What would you like to see change here in our city as we work towards reconciliation?
And specific regarding to the First Nations, we must offer apologies and forgiveness to one another for past and continuing wrongs, and we must rectify ongoing wrongs. The residential school grave site discoveries, very disturbing, and I guess it was time that that came out and reinforced just how much our neighbors in the Aboriginal community have been wronged in the past. And the blame is on the past governments, but we have to deal with this today, and we need a basic change in our thoughts towards them. But we also need to realize that in the long run, Aboriginal hunting and fishing rights are not sustainable, and the ongoing pattern of financial support does not do the Aboriginal people any favor. We need to phase out Aboriginal rights, starting with the current young generation, and integrate them into our society so that they have the dignity of standing on their own and celebrating their culture and practicing their traditional beliefs and ceremonies as our equals in society. And we need to ensure that tax money meant for the benefit of Aboriginal people reaches the people instead of just the ones who happen to be family of council members. Their leadership, the band councils and officials, must be accountable for the money given to them by Ottawa, as was the case under the Harper government. Canadians are generous. We do want to help them, but we also want to know that it's getting to the people in need and not just a select few. And inexplicably, the Liberal government took back the auditing program that the Harper government brought in. It doesn't make sense to turn that money loose and let it be misused again.
Geoffrey Capp is the Christian Heritage Party candidate for the City of Lethbridge. Geoffrey, thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.